Good morning, everyone. This is Jeffy Kennedy, also writing as Jennifer K. Lambert, author of Epic Fantasy Romance. I'm here with my first cup of coffee. Excellent and much needed. It was a long weekend. But today is Monday, May 19th, 2025. And yeah, here I am bright and early Monday morning. Uh, this weekend was the Santa Fe International Literary Festival, which is helmed by my darling friend, Megan Mulry, executive director. And so I went and spent a lot of time volunteering and getting to see some authors and that sort of thing. And yeah, there's probably a lot to unpack there. And this is, I think, the third or fourth year that they've done this. And I hadn't gone before because my bestie wasn't investing her entire life energy into it. Um, but boy, folks, I sure do hate things that are focused around literary stuff. And so I think today is going to be, unfortunately, a bit of a rant about the attitudes about taste, art, deciding what's good. General catch up on me before I go into this whole thing, in case you don't want to hear it. Um, but why would you be listening, right? Although I know a lot of you like dip in on Instagram and look to see if my bright and shiny face is still bright and shiny, and that's perfectly okay too. Thank you for checking on me. Uh, I had a good week last week. I got another 2,000 word day on Friday, so I did almost 9,000 words last week on the secret project, and just waiting for the edit letter to come in on A Rose in the Mirror. Trying not to freak out that the delay means that they had a whole lot of stuff to say. It's like, oh well, if if it was really all in place and there was not much to do, they could have just said, "Great, here are your line edits." But I'm trying not to be neurotic about this. So, all right, Santa Fe Literary Festival, Santa Fe International Literary Festival. It was just, I mean, it was beautifully run. Megan did an amazing job. There were interesting authors there. Uh, Ones that I got to hear speak were, now I'm not going to be able to think of everybody's names. Uh, because I was volunteering, I was mainly minding the doors, so I didn't get to do 100% attention on this. But Rashi Joan Halifax did a wonderful guided meditation and discussion. Then I got to hear Amy Tan talk about her new book. And then there was a great panel which was celebrating the life and legacy of N. Scott Mobaday. Terry Tempest Williams was there, a few of his family members. A guy named Julian Brave Noisecat, who came over from the Bay Area for this, and he was really interesting. I didn't know that Alcatraz had been occupied. Uh, and so maybe I'm the only person in the world who didn't know this, but it was interesting hearing him talk about that. And then I got to hear Miranda July talk about all fours. The sound was unfortunately bad on that session, so it was difficult to hear her. And yeah, there were things about it that didn't go as well as it could have, I felt. But, and who was the other person? Oh, Danzy Senna. I heard part of her talk as well. Um, and I think I'm going to lead in with that, even though it's not chronological. Uh, that's what my memoir teachers always taught me, creative nonfiction teachers, break the gridlock of chronology. Sometimes you want to lead with subject matter, right? We'll pretend that this is an organized and produced podcast, which is, ha, who are we kidding? It obviously is not. So one thing that Danzy Senna said at the end during the Q&A, somebody asked her if her publisher had been supportive of her as an author of color, as a Native American author, and if she had encountered resistance, like when she was trying to get published. And she was clearly being careful of what she said. But, of course, we know that she encountered trouble. It's a difficult thing about the industry. But so she kind of said, her publisher's been good to her and supportive, but yes, it was a difficult road. And then she said how few Native American authors are out there. And she said, actually, how many can you name besides me? I'll tell you, there are two others. And she named them, and I didn't catch their names. I probably didn't recognize them. And she said, and I know those because they just published books. She says, and that's it. And so me back by the doors at the back of the auditorium where I'm letting people in and out so that the doors won't bang, I wanted to yell out, what about Rebecca Roanhorse? What about Darcy Little Badger? What about Stephen Graham Jones? Where, but those authors don't exist in her universe because they are outside of literary fiction. And that was how this entire weekend felt. If it was not literary fiction, it did not exist. And it's an interesting thing for me, being at this point in my career where, and I think it'll probably always be this way because writers are not people who get recognized. I mean, occasionally I get recognized, and I think it's because of the distinctive hat. But unless I'm in my specific milieu, I am not. And so, like, a couple of contrasting stories when I went to a Polycon, and that was the first conference I'd been to in quite a while. I was riding up in the elevator with a bunch of other people. And I had my bags, we were checking in. And so, like we're doing the whole bag wrestle thing and what floor do you need and all of that kind of thing. And everybody's happy to be getting to the conference. So we're laughing, and joking around. And I get off on my floor, dragging my two incredibly heavy suitcases because they were mostly full of books, not clothes. I want to add that caveat. So I'm trudging down and I hear this one woman in the elevator go, well, that was freaky. And the others are like, what? And she goes, that was Jeffy Kennedy. And they're all, oh, yeah. And I was laughing, right? Because first of all, she could have said hi to me in the elevator. She recognized me. But I've had people tell me at various times, come to my signing table and say, I rode in an elevator with you once. It's like, say hello, geez. But I get it. I actually do. So like in those kinds of cases, it's startling to me to be recognized, right? And I don't think I had my hat on even. I'm pretty sure I did not. So that was good recognizing on her part. And I was schleppy from traveling, flying all day. Anyway, at this, where I'm volunteering, and I just have my name tag, Jeffy Kennedy, nobody knows who I am, right? I am just some volunteer, fresh meat, and absolutely no one at all. And everybody is focused on these celebrity authors. And I mean, it was incredibly well attended. It was a fantastically successful event. And in the food truck line, I was standing by some people who had flown in from the Bay Area to visit, and this was part of it, is there was a lot of wealth on display. And I don't normally have a problem with that. I have been around very wealthy people all of my life. Like I've been to Phyllis Coor's house for fundraisers and that kind of thing, and was mostly super envious of their gardens. You would not believe how, like, it was incredible. And I've had friends who are multimillionaires. I do have friends who are multimillionaires, and everybody's slightly different that way. But this was just like, maybe I'm not going to be able to articulate this well. It was just kind of a celebration of exclusivity. Let me put it that way. So like everything about this was, choosing these authors who have been elevated, like Miranda July with her book All Fours, which I've talked about on this podcast, and I found very interesting. But she's just like broken out. She's just hugely, hugely popular for this book about perimenopause. It hit the right note at the right time, right? Which is so much of what commercial success is about. When we talk about, there's many wonderful books that just for whatever reason never hit, and then there's other books that just like click, they're right thing at the right time, and boom, it's a phenom. And I've talked about phenoms on here a lot. And one thing, is there are people who spend their lives, agents, Donald Moss, who try to dissect how to create a phenom, but you can't, because there's this other quality to it of the mass mind and serendipity, and if people are getting the thing that they want to hear at the right moment. Uh, it was interesting because Amy Tan was they're talking about her newest book, which is like this backyard bird catalog where she, like during pandemic, observed the birds in her backyard and got the hummingbirds to feed from her hand and learned how to draw the birds. And she did a beautiful job. I mean, it's really neat. And I've been reading Amy Tan, probably like all of you, like since the Joy Luck Club back in the day. So she has firmly established her reputation. But, like just for grins, I went and looked up this new book of hers, which has been out for a little while, like maybe a year. Yeah, it's a little over a year that it's been out, April 24th. And it's and let me just say, it was great to listen to her talk. She was very smart, very engaging. She was very good at the public speaking in a way that Miranda July was not. And I'm sure that's a function of practice. Amy Tan's, you know, what got decades long career, and Miranda July, even though she does performance art kinds of things, I don't think she's used to being uh, interviewed as an author, especially in a huge auditorium with lots of people like that. She seemed like she was nervous, and who can blame her. Amy Tan was amazing how she spoke, but like this book of hers that's been out for over a year has 818 ratings on Amazon, which is not a resounding commercial success, right? But she has already been enshrined as an amazing author and someone to be celebrated and so forth. And so, and that's kind of how everything is in this particular perspective, like that there are these um, authors that are given almost a divine status, right? That they are the artists, and they live in this world where genre writers simply do not exist. They are not even worth acknowledging, and it's just really kind of funky. And the whole thing is set up so that like the authors would come up on this big stage and be interviewed and so forth, but they didn't interact with anybody. They didn't come to the receptions. They were swept away, and literally so. Like after the N. Scott Momaday panel, I went up front and lingered because I wanted to say hello to Terry Tempest Williams. And if you haven't read her, she's a wonderful writer, and she was great on the panels too. I mean, she's super wise and interesting and composed. But I took a class with Terry 30 years ago, probably. She taught a week-long class at University of Wyoming when I was a baby writer, and she gave me a blurb for my very first book, for my essay collection, and I hadn't been in touch with her since. And so, I mean, because like what, I'm going to tug at her sleeve, but I wanted to say hello, right? And there's like any other writing or publishing conference that I would go to, this would be a very simple thing for me to go say hello to one of my teachers, one of my fellow writers, right? So I was waiting, and this one woman was kind of monopolizing her. And then I was waiting to say hello, and had planned out, as one does, what I was going to say. That I was sure she would not remember me, but I wanted to thank her. Because here I am making my living as an author, if not a semi-divine celebrated one, Still doing okay for myself. More ratings and reviews than Amy Tan. I know that's not fair because it's just that one book. I'm sure if we looked up Joy Luck Club or one of the others, it would be stratospheric. But still, these marks of how we judge success, I've talked about that a lot on here. That's why you have to go back to your own internal calibration, your own metrics of what you're trying to accomplish and why, right? Because these are wildly different metrics of success, right? If I went to a literary festival, well, when I go to these kinds of things, I want to interact with people. No, I did not get to say hello to Terry because one of her minders came in and like put an arm around her and turned her away and whisked her off. And this was the whole thing, that they wanted to, protect the authors from the readers, from the people that were there to see them. And yeah, you got to keep a person from being mobbed, but um, yeah, it was interesting, and there were just all sorts of ways that this um, kind of exclusionary attitude manifested in ways that I found very disturbing. And it was odd for me to be at something that should have been my happy place, right? Where everybody's there talking about books and reading and authors. And there's a bookstore. I did buy a book. I should show you the book I bought. Hold on. Bookworks was the official bookseller for the festival. And I got this book, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And I started reading it during my lunch break. I sat out in the courtyard in the sun, and that was like the best part, was when I got to sit and read in the sun. And I also got from Bookworks this great sticker. If you're not on video, it's a Zia, the New Mexico symbol, with some glitter in it and a yellow-eyed black cat peering out from the edge, and it's super cute. And I'm going to put it on my laptop. Although I'm worried that I'm going to have to start replacing my laptop soon, and then I'm going to lose all of my stickers. I'll have to start over. New collection. So, what is your point, Jeffy? Do I have a point? I don't know. I was glad I went. Megan was glad to have me there. But yeah, I don't like this idea of setting up. Oh, there's like this whole thing that I haven't unpacked yet. Ugh. Well, I'll try to do it fast and we could talk. I'll undoubtedly revisit the topic. But I think I mentioned last week that I've been talking to this friend of mine who is like an art history professor, and talking about the ideas of taste and art and so forth. And they were able to kind of validate some of the ideas that I've had for a long time, and that if longtime listeners will have heard me rant about any number of times. But it's this idea of taste, of something being declared art or being declared good, belonging to a classist system, that the people with wealth and running in these high social circles reinforce to each other that this is worthy of elevation. This is what we are going to crown as being semi-divine, and we are going to hold these people up as being the thing, that this is good, that like what Miranda July writes is art and good, but Molly Roden Winter's More, which I actually think is a much better book, that does not get elevated in the same way, which is more of a memoir. So I don't know. I'm probably, as usual, crossing my genres and streams. But I, I'm amazed that, and I probably shouldn't call out this particular author because it's probably not her fault. It's the circle she swims in. But how you can sit in Santa Fe, where Rebecca Roan Horace, a Nebula Award-winning author of science fiction, Darcy, that she, like, you don't even know she exists. And she lives right here in the town that you're visiting. Darcy Little Badger is a Nebula Award winner, or at least a nominee. And there's so many others. And it's like, how can you just like not know that these authors exist? Uh, But, again, it comes back around to my friend is just giving me some really interesting insights onto that because it has always seemed somewhat arbitrary to me which things get declared as, oh, well, this is a celebrated author. And one thing that does happen is once you get enshrined, in some ways, like you do get to rest on your laurels. You don't have to keep delivering. And, I have a friend who talks about it as being sprinkled with fairy dust, that you get these authors. And I'm not calling out Sarah J. Maas in particular because I think Sarah is, really hit something and really delivers to her fans and so forth. But there is a phenomenon where if your book is a phenomenon, then you can almost write anything at all and people will still buy your books. Um, Laurel K. Hamilton. I mean, I loved her books. She went off the rails. She still does amazingly well. And you could argue that her books are incoherent. Um, I haven't read one in a long time. Maybe there were a few there that were incoherent, but maybe they got better. I don't normally slam other authors, and so I'm sorry to do that. Hopefully, Laurel will never know. Don't tell her. Okay. All right. On that note, I'm going to sign off. I hope that you all have an amazing week, an inclusive week. Uh, and if you're a regular commenter or want to post on social media, uh, let's start sharing some names of Native American authors. How's that? Or Indigenous authors, Canadian, what have you. Let's pretend that there are more than 3. And I will talk to you all on Friday. You all take care. Bye bye.